Ethiopia, Ard al-Habesha, the land of Abyssinia, the land of great kings, the land of mystery, spirituality, the land of ancient history. As a young African American with West Indian parentage, I always wondered about Ethiopia. This land, for my family and for those African Americans living in the West, always had a type of magic to it, a type of mystery. It was a land where African people were proud, where early civilization developed. Some say that even the first man walked this land. But in my quest, I realized that Ethiopia was more than just a land of history. It was a land of high spirituality. It is said that lost Ark of the Covenant lies in this land. It is also said that great Christian rulers and kings walked this land and maintained the teachings of Jesus, peace be upon him. As a Muslim, I came to understand that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, when living in Mecca and when he found that he was persecuted and his followers needed help, he told them, if you go out to the land of Habesha, to Abyssinia, there you will find a king who oppresses nobody. It is a land of truth. Hiya ardun sidq. How did he know that it was a land of truth? Why did he send his followers into Africa before he sent them to Palestine, before he sent them to Persia, even to Yemen? Why?
When you're making hijrah, what you're doing is you are entering into a strange world where you don't have honor, you don't have protection, you don't have a passport basically. And you are at the mercy of those around you. To make matters worse, they have been told to go to a land where you're not even speaking Arabic, where the people are not Arabs. It's a different culture. It's a land in Africa, in modern day Abyssinia, Habesha, where the culture, the people, everything is different. So this underscores how difficult Mecca would have been for them to prefer going to Abyssinia over remaining in Mecca. Not all of the lands of the non-Muslims are the same. Some of the lands of the non-Muslims are peaceful. You can live there and worship Allah. And others are hostile. Mecca and Abyssinia were not the same lands. Abyssinia was a land they could emigrate to and live in peacefully. Mecca was not. And this is a very important point that we especially need to extrapolate from in our times. That not all of the lands are the same. There are lands where freedoms are guaranteed. And there are lands where people are persecuted. And so in our religion, we have the clear-cut political notion that there are certain lands you are allowed to live in and you should live in. What is the condition? You have the freedom to worship Allah there. And if we have that freedom, then we remain law-abiding citizens of that land. the model of the Abyssinian Muslims is a model that we here in America can benefit from. I'm not saying it's exactly the same. There's nothing, no two things are exactly the same. But I'm saying overall there is a model. And that model is what? You live as a minority in a majority non-Muslim land, and you obey the laws of the land, and you understand that you are citizens, you are under the government of that land, and you don't intend to overthrow the constitution of the government. The Muslims of Abyssinia were not plotting and planning to overthrow the Najashi, were they?
That Islam did not come into Ethiopia as a conqueror, but Muslims came as refugees. The Prophet Muhammad called Ethiopia a land of truth. He sent his followers there before he sent them to Medina in the north, before they went to Jerusalem, before they went to Persia, before they went to Malaysia. They entered the African continent. And so
their goal in Abyssinia was nothing other than the freedom to worship Allah, correct? Right? They had no political ambitions, none. And they remained there for more than a decade. And this is interesting. The Muslims in Abyssinia, way after Medina was founded. In fact, not just more than a decade, they remained there for 14 years. For 14 years. 7 years after the Hijrah, the Muslims were still in Abyssinia. It was only after the Battle of Khaybar that the Prophet ﷺ sent them a letter to Ja'far. Ja'far did not participate in Badr and Uhud. Why? Because he wasn't there. Ja'far was in Abyssinia, taking care of the Muslims over there. Only after the Battle of Khaybar, and that's in the 7th year of the Hijrah, did the Prophet ﷺ send them a letter and tell them to come back. The Najashi was a Christian king, and the Prophet ﷺ said, this is interesting, he is a just king. Why is he a just king? Because he does not persecute his subjects, and he does not interfere in their religion. Notice, allowing people the freedom to worship is considered to be a just kingdom. Now, there are some narrow-minded Muslims amongst us who think that an Islamic state is a utopic Islamic state would be one in which all freedoms are banned of religion. You have to be a Muslim, and if you're not Muslim, then you have 1,000,001 restrictions on you. Our Prophet ﷺ is praising a Christian king, calling him a just king. Why? Because you have the freedom to worship. Now, is it possible that a Christian can be praised for this freedom, and yet our Sharia tells us that we shouldn't have this freedom? Think about it. I'm just asking you to think about it. Is it possible that a Christian king can be praised, that he is a just king, he has a Malikun Adil? Why? Because he's not going to persecute you for your faith. The government, the Islamic government, does not have the right to ban other religions.
Bilal was an Abyssinian slave who was tortured, and he became a Muslim whilst he was a slave. Later he was freed. The Prophet elevated him, had him climb on top of the Kaaba and make the call to prayer. And he was known as the caller to prayer of the Prophet. And on one occasion, Abu Dhar ibn al-Ghaffari, who the Prophet ﷺ promised would be among the people of paradise, Abu Dhar, in a fit of anger, he called Bilal in a negative sense, "You son of a black woman." In a negative sense. He was the son of a black woman in reality, but he used the terms in a negative sense. When the Prophet ﷺ heard that, he turned to Abu Dhar and said, "Anta rajulun fika al-jahiliyyah." You are a man in whom the beliefs of the time of ignorance remains. There is ignorance in you. And he was very angry. These are the times when the Prophet ﷺ was angry, and it was visible in his face. Anger over injustice. So when Abu Dhar realized the error, because these things happen, comes out of people's mouths without thinking, he immediately put his head on the ground in front of Bilal and said, I will not lift my head until you walk over it. And in those days, one might say, what's the big deal about walking over somebody's head? This was a symbol of humility. You have been humbled, so much so that your master, those who are over you, walk over your head. Bilal said, no, it's okay. No, it's all right. You know, I know you have made the error and you are repentant. You know, I don't hold you for it. You don't have to do that. Please don't. In fact, Bilal refused to step over his head. Abu Dhar refused. He said, by Allah, I'm not going to lift my head until you step over it. Meaning, if you don't, I'm going to be lying here for God knows how long. So in order to relieve him of that guilt, to help him relieve himself of the guilt, Bilal walked over his head. The leading narrators, compilers of hadith, were non-Arabs. Ibn Majah, An-Nasa'i, Al-Bukhari, and so on and so forth, were non-Arabs.